Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to today's episode of NISSMAT podcast. I'm your host, Pavanjit Aluwalia, and today we are diving into a topic that many of us can relate to: relationship walking on eggshells. Today, we'll explore the dynamics of feeling overly cautious in relationships, the impact it has on our mental and emotional well being, and strategies to foster healthier and open communication. But before we start, I'd like to give you a little brief on NISSMAT. NISSMAT has got the full word. NISSMAT stands for National Institute of Security, Safety, Management and Applied Technology. It has four wings: the NISSMAT Forum, on which we are present today, which does podcasts, webinars, seminars, and award functions. The second vertical is the NISSMAT Education, the third being NISSMAT Enterprise, and the fourth NISSMAT Foundation, which actually we have yet to start, but we're looking for people who can help us in doing this. I'd also request you to like, subscribe, and share the YouTube link. It encourages us to do more and better work. You can watch all our previous programs by logging on to NISSMAT.com. Now a word about the speakers of today. Mr. Sipal Singh is the president of NISSMAT. He is a master's in English literature and a former very senior police officer who has held very important and sensitive appointments in the government of India. He fully knows how important it is to create relationships and walking on eggshells. Our second speaker who joins us today is from the United States, Kashiana Singh. She's a regular NISSMAT and TEDx speaker. She's a poet. She's published 3 books and the 4th is on the way, and is the managing editor for Poets Reading for News. She's a result and mission-driven executive specializing in delivering sustainable operating results in large and mid-sized professional service companies. She manages risks by creating a culture of transparency in the organizations that she leads. I will start the podcast today by asking the first question to our president, Mr. Sipal Singh. What does walking on eggshells mean in a relationship context?
Well, let's say walking on eggshell actually indicates the delicacy of the relationship. It indicates that there is a sort of delicate dance of relationship very often. We are required to walk very cautiously so that we do not tread on somebody's toes and upset the apple cart of relationship. Every step which we take has to be measured so that any misstep may not shatter the fragile relationship which normally we have and have built up painstakingly. The complexities of human relationship, where emotions are involved, where tender and vulnerable, deep sensitivities are involved, that is what is very delicate. That is why walking on eggshell, if we consider, yes, we are walking on eggshell, we may we may smash some eggshell while walking on this. That is why walking on eggshell has to be very thoroughly gone to, so that we know how much resilience, what steps we have to take, how much resilience we should show, what sensitivity we should have, what empathy we have with other people. Even in the face of adversity, how we can win over and have love and power in that enduring relationship. So that is why it is called walking on eggshell.
I think it's an excellent answer, but I've always had the feeling that you got to be very careful when talking to people whom you don't know, because you don't know as to what is the reaction of that person going to be, and that to me is also walking on eggshells. Uh, Kashiana, can you give us some typical examples of walking on eggshells?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again. It's a delight to be on NISSMAT always. Uh, I'll give you one example first, and it relates to what you said, which is that it's not just about relationships that we live in and out and day in and out with, but one of the examples of that is that it can also occur in non-typical relationship paradigms, like uh, patient and doctor, patient and clinician interactions. In fact, clinicians these days are expected to go through a training which teaches them about potential psycho-emotional exploitation that can take place during patient encounters, resulting in the emotional exhaustion for clinicians. So to your point, it's not just about people you know and work with or are living with on a day-to-day basis, but other relationships, which of course work comes into place. Of course, doctor and patient comes, student and teacher comes into play. This is very commonly known that many students carry trauma from childhood because of how the interactions occurred in a classroom. And remember, that's also not 1:1. It could be 1:many as well. The teacher in a classroom is interacting with many, but the many is different people. And there are some people that would react in a way that carries that trauma forward through not only their lives, but intergenerational trauma as well. And because I heard our panelist, Mr. Sipal Singh, talk about me and poetry, if you don't mind, I'd like to actually read a poem about transactional analysis and walking on eggshells, if I have your permission.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And the poem, it's interesting because the poem is called Transactional Analysis. And here's how it goes. Okay. Transactional. Sorry, go ahead.
Hello. While she is talking about transactional analysis, I'd like to draw the attention of the viewers as well as the listeners that actually the word transactional analysis was coined by Berne. Berne had propounded a theory, which is theory of parent, adult, and child. And he has propounded that theory and has called it transactional analysis. Yani one having a transaction with other having transaction with you. So according to him, according to the transactional analysis theory, every individual, maybe A, B, C, D, male, female, even respective partner, your life partner, your business partner, every individual, according to him, has got an ego state, a psychological state, which can be defined in three. One is a psychological state of a parent, the parent psychological state. Then the second stage of ego state is that of an adult, and the third is that of a child. So that is why his theory is called parent, adult, and child transactional analysis, PAC. That parent doesn't mean necessarily a parent, but
There's
the
a
ego
slide that
state.
I have. There's a slide that I have on the subject. Do you want me to show that?
Yes. Kindly show me the slide.
Just take a second. Can you see it?
I'll continue anyway. You see, the
Not yet.
three ego state as no. This is parent, adult, child, parent, adult, and child. These are the three ego state. Now, parent ego state or parent psychological conditions of mind represent a learned behavior. An attitude figures himself like a parent, and therefore he thinks that he is absolutely correct. Maybe he is also caregiver. The second stage everyone has, that is the stage of an adult. Now, adult ego state is rational. It is a stage where you are objective. You have learned logically, and you are focusing on the realities and problem solving. That is why it is called adult. The child ego state reflects only emotions, spontaneity, and creativity, which is influenced sometimes by past experiences and feeling. Now, healthy relationship requires awareness and understanding of these ego states. The deeper you go, you understand that if one ego state is hooked by the other ego state, then probably there will be a parallel transaction. It may be good. When the parent says something to the child, he says, "My child, how are you? Dear Kabir, how are you?" Now the child is मुस्कुरा के जवाब है, "Thank you, Dadi. Thank you, Dadi." The transaction is smooth. The parent is talking to the child is talking to the parent, the transaction is smooth. It's a parallel transaction. But if the parent says to the child, "You cannot, don't come here again and again," and the child still wants to crave and goes to the Dadi, again she rejects, "I have to go here, go away." There the transaction gets broken. And therefore, that means the parent is talking to the child in a form as if he is talking parent to parent, but he is talking parent to child. The child is reacting in the same form as a child. Therefore, the transaction gets crossed. Once the communication gets crossed, the relationship gets affected. The relationship gets affected. That is why he said that everyone should try to understand and try to hook in the other parents, other state. Supposing you are behaving or you are acting as an adult, and I try to act with you as a parent. You say, "How are you, sir? How are you?" I said, "Thank you very much, Paman. I am all right. Why are you bothered about me?" So you are talking to me as an adult to adult. I am behaving like a parent. "Oh, ठीक है, I am all right." So the transaction gets crossed. The relationship gets obstructed. The relationship gets bad. In the same state, I'll ask one more example. For example, there's a relationship between husband and the wife. The wife is sleeping in the morning. The husband goes there and he has got up. He's going to the office. He talks to his wife in a sort of, adult to a child. He says, "Darling, can I have a cup of tea? Will you get up?" Now, he has, as an adult, tried to talk to her as an adult, but she is sleeping. He has not tried to hook her child ego. She reacts, "Hell with you, I am having headache for the last 24 hours. You have never bothered. Go ahead. Okay, make your tea yourself." The transaction immediately gets crossed and the relationship gets affected. So the relationship depends on how beautifully and how nicely you're able to hook in the state of mind so that the parallel transaction is there. So that is why I said that basically when Kashiana refers to transaction, so I immediately thought that I'll refer to transactional analysis of PAC. Carry on, Kashiana, if you have something.
Sure.
Let me
Sure.
just stop the share. Just let me stop.
Yeah, it's stopped now. All right. Yes, I would thank you for that. That's extremely helpful. And also I always love the examples of the tea and the child and the parent. And I'd like to share some more around that, but let me start with a poem because it lightens, yet it encompasses the entire theory of transactional analysis. And I don't know who the poet is. This is an anonymous poet, but I thought this made sense to read for today. The poem is called Transactional Analysis, and it goes like this. If I put you before me, would we both actually obtain a benefit, or would all of it be merely illusory? If I take more than you, do you have nil, zero? Do you have nil and I have two? If I take more than you, do you have nil and I have two? As if the accounting accounted to something less than a point of view. Numbers make the world concrete. The truth hides in poetry. We can't find a new conceit. This will feed the hungry and save the rhino while bolstering my ego. One more time, I'll read the second one because that's extremely important. It is not, transactions and relationships are not a zero-sum game. We are not playing a zero-sum game in relationships. And that's where everything that we just heard about transactional analysis, going deeper, understanding comes in. And it's summarized so beautifully in this. If I take more than you, do you have zero, nil, and I have two? As if the accounting accounted to something less than a point of view. It's all about points of views. One doesn't make me more powerful and you less powerful. And that's the crux of everything that you just said, Mr. Sipal Singh, about the parent-adult-child interaction.
Beautiful poetic description, Kashiana. This involves the sensitivity or empathy, I would call it, to go into the other person. What is he feeling? As it is said that Keats, the English poet, had an immense sensitivity. So much so they said that he could mentally walk into other one's personality and then try depicting that personality. Supposing there was some sparrow picking up grains. No, he write a poetry which will show as if he is picking up the grains. I mean, considering the sparrow as a most important individual at that point of time and giving that empathy to him. So any relationship, for example, it may be the parent may be having operating on the current information, or adult may be having on current information, analyzing situations, involves logical thinking maybe, involves problem solving maybe, involves decision making maybe, and he allows individuals to assess reality accurately. Adult is good in his way. But example, including analyzing data and making plans or having mature discussion does not necessarily mean that he'll be able to have good relationship with another partner of his. Because unless he gives way, this is where you're come walking on eggshell. If he only thinks that he is absolutely having everything, analyzed data is with him, making plans are there, whatever, he is not bothered with others. But if he tries to encompass in the other ego state, example, include some sort of, considering at time that my partner is like a child and expresses spontaneous and creative behavior with his partner, or includes playing and laughing like a free child laugh at time, instead of all the time in relationship you are sulking and pouting as if you are an adult and this man. So therefore, walking on action is therefore told about relationship. It is not very easy. It is easier to explain. But when you take day-to-day life, it becomes difficult. And therefore they say that you should not crush the eggshells. Be very careful. And relationship means that carefulness while you are walking. Don't take any misstep. Kashiana, carry on, please.
Kashiana, we were talking before you went on, before the beautiful poem. I wanted you to give us some typical causes of walking on eggshells.
Yeah. The typical causes are one, everything that we just said, which is the lack of awareness, the lack of self-awareness, and the lack of open communication. The most common causes, whether it's in a business environment, a home environment, the parent, the child, whichever relationship, the first step is self-awareness. What state do I usually walk into a room in? What's my typical default state? All of us have a default state, right? We are either default in an adult state, and it doesn't, remember, states have nothing to do with my age or the role that I play. The state is my inner state, my inner being, and we all have default state, right? It's like the machine is default set to a particular state. Getting aware about what my default state, or not, to your point about the cause, not being aware that what's my general default. Am I usually the adult in the room, the parent in the room, the child in the room, or something in between? I also want to add to what Mr. Sipal Singh said. These states are not hard-coded. You move, they are levels. They are a paradigm. You could be at the extreme lower end of a child state, or you could be at the extreme upper end of a child state. You could be at the extreme lower. It's a range, right? It's not a single point state. So knowing what is your default state or not knowing is a cause. Not knowing then what's my paradigm? How does that little bar move between the lower end of the state and the upper end of a state? And what have I trained myself to be able to do, right? Not training yourself to be able to switch states, which is move between parent, adult, and child, or child, adult, and parent, but also not knowing how to lower my child state or up my adult state, right? Moving the bar. So it's two things that I don't understand. Those are the two most typical causes. The other causes that do exist are things like just social and generational issues, right? There are social environments. We are not ourselves. We are not a unit. We are not in a watertight compartment. We are what is around us. And those social impacts, for example, we have the war going on in Palestine, Gaza, right? The transactional and the PAC analysis and what happens on the ground there will be very different than what happens on the ground in your home, my home, or in a country like United States or in India. So the social environment or the socio-political environment matters. Of course, I'm not even calling out the home environment, but I'm coming to it from the perspective of intergenerational habits, intergenerational, right, rituals, personal rituals. We know the core of psychiatric and psychological issues are when we transfer intergenerational habits from one generation to another without the self-awareness of either addressing it or being aware of it, so you know how to either withdraw or lean into, depending on the situation. So this is it's a great topic. I love it, but it's also an extremely complex topic. We could be doing a whole pieces around the topic. But does that help? And any comments from you or Mr.
What I feel is that, when you're walking on eggshells, there's also an assessment of what you feel the other person may react to. And that is something that I've been very cautious about, is when I talk to someone, I really try and look at the person and see as to whether I'm crossing the threshold where he can, get annoyed, or he can sort of react to a particular situation, which may not be the reaction that I'm looking at. I may just pass a comment, which the other person may sort of take it adversely or otherwise.
Yeah, to that, I want to add to that, because whatever we communicate, it's all about communication ultimately, right? Whatever we communicate, there are two levels to that. One is the social message, which is what are my words, what am I saying? And the second is the psychological message, right? Which is what do I mean? And we need to understand that when our social message, that is what are the words coming out of my mouth, what's my body language, what's my facial expression, how am I sitting, I'm standing, you are like, what does that translate to? What do I mean? What do I mean is delivered not just by the words, but how am I leaning in or am I leaning back? Am I standing or am I sitting? Am I putting my arms around your shoulder, or am I crossing my arms and standing? So the psychological message and the social message, when there's a gap between those two, again, comes back to self-awareness. That leads to walking on eggshells because you're not aligned.
And also, it also depends upon how the recipient takes your message.
Of course.
And
I,
you may be well-meaning in whatever you're saying. Your social message may be excellent, or your business message may be excellent. But how the other person perceives when he receives your message is also a very typical situation, which one has to be very respectful of.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
let, let,
agree
us
with that.
let's move on to from home environment or people that we know into a business environment. What does walking on eggshells mean in a business environment?
Um, in a business environment, it translates to a few things. So first of all, there is you both probably know that, but there's a Harvard study that says, and this is very applicable, especially to the business environment, but also to the personal environment, that their studies have shown that 67% of people generally identify that I am conflict averse. I don't like to be in a conflict. Okay? Keep that fact. Now, with that being said, that's what impacts the business environment very deeply. Because if I'm conflict averse, then I'm going to avoid having a direct conversation either as a leader with the teams that I work with, or as a team with the leaders that I work with. So in a business environment, when a leader, let's say it first from a leader perspective, because typically the assumption is that when you say walking on eggshells in a business environment, it's always about the junior person in the hierarchy, in a hierarchical situation, right? And hierarchy in a business environment is not about roles and designations and the organizational chart. It's about the power, right? Who wields more power in the room? So from a leader perspective, when a leader walks on eggshells in a big business environment, that means they're afraid of making unpopular or tough decisions. And that leads to complications. It leads to a toxic culture. It leads to having bad bosses because you're leading by example. Uh, there will be single people or a few people that dominate every discussion. There is an internal conflict that happens, and collaboration, which is the key to everything in a business environment, will never happen if the culture is that of walking on eggshells, right? So, Pavan sir, it's never about one individual, but and we know that. We've all had the experience of being in situations, organizations, or teams where the culture is that of walking on eggshells. And when the culture is that of walking on eggshells, that means there's no collaboration. People are not opening up and giving good ideas because they're always trying to walk on eggshells and find the right time to state what they want to state, or the right moment to say what they want to say. And people are or there's just general disengagement, which means there is lower performance. If I'm not engaged and I'm constantly walking on eggshells during my day in the business situation, I am not going to be performing to my utmost potential, right? I'll just do what is needed to be done because I feel like my work I'm always second guessing myself. I'm always afraid to say what I have to say because of the culture of walking on eggshells. And last statement I'll say there is, it's a multiplier effect. It is never about, oh, that person, Mr. Sipal Singh and Kashiana in the business environment have a walking on eggshells relationship. That's impossible. Because when two people have that relationship, I will do something similar related to that. My social and psychological messages will be mismatched with my peers, with colleagues that I work with. So it's a multiplier effect. And that's why, from a business perspective, it's as damaging as it might be on a personal perspective, because it changes the trajectory of the company to innovate, to grow, to collaborate, and to learn new things as well.
I'll just add one thing. I
Now,
100% agree. That is
yeah,
what she says, that probably in such business environment where you have very delicate relationship and all, as she said, sometimes you have a give and take with a person, but the other person, he is rigid or you are rigid or you are not able to walk properly, and therefore it's walking on the eggshell, very careful. Yes, Pawan, carry on. Yes, Pawan.
Okay, I have a question. I have a question. Like, if both of you were instructors in a class and you were to give a talk to the employees of your organization as to how can they prevent themselves from walking on eggshells, uh, what are the pointers that you would give?
I can
Kasha,
I can go
we
first.
start with you, Kasha.
Yeah, I'll go first, and I'll give you three things that I would do, and I actually do. Instructors in a class, and I again, I think we are That's the point. Your question has the answer. We are instructors in a class every day. Life is a class, and we are instructors in a class every day. So the three things that I would do, there'll be many things that I do, but the three most important things that I would do is to give my class tools for self-awareness. And at some point, when you allow, I will share my screen and actually tell you a worksheet that I use with training groups and classes to understand and unpack my personal ego state. So that's number one. It is important to create an education and a tool around this concept. And it's a simple concept. We don't need to complicate it, but we need to bring it to the class to be able to talk about it and create self-awareness. That's number one. Number two, I would get them to practice both two things. One, the ego states, but also the psychological versus the social message in different ego states. It's very important to understand, because when you do conflict resolution, more often than not, the answer from the parties involved is, that's not what I meant, right? But that's not the point. It isn't about what you meant, it's about what the other person received. And you said, like, I think you said earlier, we may be meaning something, but the other person is not receiving it. Walking on eggshells resolution, ego state resolution, is never about the other person. It is about you. What are you going to bring to the table? And how could you present it differently that it will be received differently? Could you get your ego state shifted? Could you align your social and psychological message? So that is the second piece that I would do. The third piece that I would do is that understanding the natural ego states that each ego state speaks to. For example, a parent ego state will naturally speak to a child ego state. That understanding in the transactional analysis model is also important. Where if you showed the arrows chart on the slide earlier, but there's you have a default mode for which state you are in, there's also a default mode of which state will you expect the other person to be in when you are in that state. So understanding those three things to me is what I'll bring to the class. And the way you said, what will you teach? But I also want to answer the question with how I will teach it, right? The how is as important. Is you can speak about this. We can do this discussion all day, every day. That doesn't change behaviors. How is, I like to follow what is called the fishbowl methodology of teaching, which is you actually put people into a fishbowl and have them practice moving between states and seeing in real time what the impact and effect of applying these tools happens to be.
Thank you. Mr. Sipal Singh, would you like to contribute anything to this classroom environment where you want to teach a group of people as to how to prevent walking on eggshells while they're at work?
I couldn't get it because there was a lot of disruption in your talk. In any case, I like to wind up my point of view on the basis of what Kashiana. Kashiana has practically given instances of hooking the ego state in the day-to-day life. I mean, the way the hook is different because experience makes you think like do like that, do like that. But ultimately, it is the same thing. It's a question of a very, very critical analysis of the ego state of the other in your mind. And then you say, okay, oh, yes, this he or she or child or partner is operating in that ego state, that psychological state. Now, if I want to carry on the relationship, how I should hook into that ego state so the relationship remains smooth and avoids our walking on the eggshell all the time. So, under these circumstances, understanding the transactional analysis is a good relationship therapy, I would say. I mean, you understand the transactional analysis is a good relationship therapy for you. And it can be applied anywhere, as a leader to subordinate, as a parent to child, as an adult to adult, as a partner to partner. It's a good therapy. But as she has said, practical experience gives you much more understanding and nuances, and you are able to walk practically on that. So, on the basis of that, everyone's experience is different. Some people are able to do in this way, others are able to do that way. So, it all depends as to how your practical experience you are translating in your relationship with others. So, relationship itself, any relationship, is a very, very important matter, very, very important subject. And it is the subject which actually goes, I think it may be the political arena, it may be business arena, it may be in the home, anywhere, wherever you feel, you will find that this particular relationship has to be clearly understood so that you do not go about walking on the eggshell and treading them. You know, this is what I say, that the good and effective communication balances the influences of all ego states. All ego states, all psychological states, all can be validated on the basis of transactional analysis, ultimately.
Okay, I have another question, and Kashiana, I think you should take this on. Give us some common signs that someone is walking on eggshells in the workplace.
I was hoping you would ask that question. So yes, that is extremely important. And that is one of the tools as well in a teaching in a classroom where you teach people to look for common signs. That means you're walking on eggshells. And I'll just state a few. Any red flags or common signs, right? I like to call them the red flags for any relationship, are if you have to what I meant earlier by second guessing. Another way of saying it is if you're constantly filtering what you're trying to say. You're never natural in the way you're talking to somebody. Let's say you and I have a relationship and I'm constantly preparing, oh, I have to talk to Pavan sir today. Let me practice what I have to say. I'm never able to come naturally to you. If I have to constantly filter, that means that's a red flag. If they make everything about themselves, whether I make, and they is intentional, they doesn't mean the other, they means the other or you. If everything is about me, if I'm at the center of the conversation, that's a red flag too. If they, again, they could mean you or me. Don't hold myself accountable for my action. A little bit of what Mr. Sipal was saying in a different way, which is it's okay to apologize. That really means holding yourself accountable for your actions, right? So how do we demonstrate accountability for our actions? Or how do they demonstrate accountability for their actions? And when that doesn't happen, that's a red flag for the relationship. Remember, when there are arguments, whether in the business or at home or in any relationship, it is very often turns into proving that I was right, right? It really does not matter who was right. What matters is where are we in this situation today and how do we hold ourselves accountable for that action and think about what could have been done different. When that doesn't happen, if there is more taking than giving, I said earlier, right? We are responsible. It's never about the other. I'll keep saying this. It's about me. And if I am taking more than giving, if they are receiving more than giving, then that's a red flag in the relationship as well. And it happens, I think one of you said spouse and partner relationships. In partner counseling, right, or in couple counseling, that's one of the first exercises they do professionally, which is let's take two boxes, two baskets, and let's pretend you're giving to each other. Let's put a few words and a few feelings that you gave each other this last week. And let's see whose basket is heavier, right? So if you're giving, if you're receiving, but you're not giving, and that's a red flag to the relationship. Now I'll, for the first time, speak about me. If it's about me and I constantly feel attacked. So if you're constantly in a sense of, oh, I have to wear my gear, my protective gear, I always need to be in my army gear, right? Because when I walk into the room with this person, or when I open a conversation with this person, then that's a red flag for a relationship. And the last one that I would say is when you feel that you are blaming somebody constantly for your problem, right? It's not my problem that you, it's not my problem that you, Pavan sir, or you, Mr. Sipal Singh, are in a bad mood. That's your responsibility as an adult to handle, right? However, if that happens all the time and you feel like you are constantly being blamed, or in self-analysis, you are constantly blaming someone for your moods, that is also a red flag in a relationship. So those are the 7 to 10 red flags I would call out.
Okay, I have another question. How can walking on eggshells affect employees' mental health and job performance?
Yes, it can. It will, for all the reasons we've just discussed, right? If I'm in, I spoke about disengagement. You are disengaged, and if you're going to be disengaged at a place where you spend probably more than half of the waking hours that you have, that is going to start impacting mental health. It also impacts mental health because you're carrying the negative toxicity of that walking on eggshells culture at work to your personal life as well. We all talk about compartmentalization, but there is nothing called compartmentalization. I am the same human that comes to work and the same human that goes back home. So the second reason why it starts impacting mental health and will impact mental health is that it affects my relationships, my personal relationships, or my outside of work relationship. The third thing it does when you're walking on eggshells is this is not just a mental impact, Pavan sir. It's a physical impact. Your body is tired besides your mental exhaustion, right? And when that starts happening, it's potential that you're not going to do what you should be doing for your physical well-being. You're probably going to be missing your exercise routine. You're probably going to be not waking up at the time you should because you want to laze around in bed, because you want to pretend like the blanket is the shield under which you're hiding. So you're going to be in bed longer. So the third thing is that my physical health gets impacted. And we know it's a vicious cycle, right? Physical and mental health are very, very interdependent on each other. So those are the things. And like I said again earlier, this is a topic you've chosen for an hour, but needs probably 25 hours to talk about. So I'll pause there.
You know, what I was thinking was that we'll just stretch it a bit, and unless you're busy, we'll take your time and walk you through a couple of more questions that I really have, and your perspective on them would be really nice. So my next question to you is, what are the typical causes of walking on eggshells in a workplace?
I think I covered it a little, but let me give it in a different angle. So let's just take a step back and say there's something about we've not covered this so far. So I want to bring that angle in. We all walk around in masks. There's an article, a Harvard article called The Masks We Wear. We all wear masks, right? We are never fully vulnerable. We don't bring our naked self, right? Our naked internal self to a relationship, and definitely not to work. The masks, the reason I'm connecting it to the work question you asked is one of the causes is how you're not vulnerable at work. You're already always wearing a mask at work. On top of it, the training around parent, adult, child, ego states, how you use the tools that we spoke, are not common in organizations even today, right? We do a lot of leadership trainings and we do a lot of employee manager trainings, but we don't go to the vulnerable place of saying, let's understand ego states. That's cause number 2. And cause number 3 is when organizations are, all organizations are trying to grow faster than their culture is ready for, right? Organizations invest in product, in innovation, in technology, in AI, in chat GPT, in computers, in laptops, in working remote, in virtual working. The percentage investment in the mental awareness of individuals in an organization is way lower. So corporate culture still hasn't evolved to where this becomes the spend for benefits of an organization to say, we invest in training, coaching, giving you tools and techniques. So those are the 3 reasons why the walking on eggshells culture is actually extremely common in corporations. And where it is not, let's flip the question. Where it is not common, that's where organizations focus on well-being and mental health, communication, open dialogue, understanding the self, being okay to cross the lines of hierarchy, right? But having open conversations. That's where these walking on eggshells situations are lower, lesser. They always will exist because these are one-to-one transaction situations, but those are the more common reasons.
Kashiana has covered most of the thing in that. I'll only add one line. In this relationship, in particular, as you described in organizational structure and business system, actually it is honoring each aspect of contribution made by anyone in your organization, transcending totally the limits sometimes of your own strong beliefs, transcending sometimes the pattern which you have evolved for yourself. Once you start realizing and honoring the aspect of contribution made by all in the organization, then this is a totally walking without crushing the eggshell. Actually, it happens even in our organization, which is considered to be a police organization, where often than not we have to sometimes overlook the contribution made by your subordinate. But if you are able to recognize and honor the little bit contribution made by in the organization by your subordinates, it transcends all limits of walking, and it gives you that pattern and that sort of environment where you will walk without crushing the eggshell.
Okay, one other question. When you have problems in an organization, can organizational development interventions be beneficial for companies where employees feel they're walking on eggshells?
100%. 100%. And that's what I meant by in the percentage spend, when the CFO at the end of the year does the analysis of what did my organization spend on what, the percentage spend on organizational development, you use the broad umbrella of organization development. I'm going narrow to within organization development, investing in transactional analysis awareness, and that the relationships awareness will absolutely transform the culture, and has done it where organizations have applied that. But it's all about where does the money go, right? The money, and it's easy because this is a problem that's a hidden problem. It isn't as in your face. It won't show up on your balance sheet till a couple of years down the line when there's non-productive employees, when you lose employees, when there's attrition, when you don't have the A-player behavior by everybody. That doesn't show up on the bottom line. So it's very easy for organizations to say, oh, let me write off this line item. We can focus on it next year. But every year you don't focus on it, you're building what I call the communication debt, right? An organization has technical debt, they have product debt. Likewise, they need to start tracking emotional debt. And the more emotional debt you add to the organization, the more you're lining yourself up for disaster over the years.
Another question that sort of comes from your answer is, what is the impact of walking on eggshells have on the overall working environment in an organization?
Yeah, and the impact of walking on eggshells in the overall working culture is it no longer remains a culture of collaboration. It no longer remains a culture of vulnerability. We always say, even to be a good manager, you need to be vulnerable. You need to be able to say, I don't know, because a manager is not the subject matter expert. But that culture doesn't get created if people are constantly walking on eggshells, right? Because the manager is going to be afraid to say, oh my God, I'm going to look weak if I say I don't know. I always need to be in the adult state. But it's okay for the manager to be in the child state and say, can you teach me? I don't know. So it does not allow the culture of collaboration. And I think there's no other, like that itself is the effect that has a ripple effect on everything else down the line in the organization.
Now, in a work environment, is it the job of the juniors to prevent walking on eggshells, or the job of the seniors to make sure that the juniors don't walk on eggshells? How do you improve the work environment?
In my view, it starts. You need to you need to talk the walk and walk the talk from top. It starts from the top first. While I've always said transactional analysis is about me. So from an individual perspective, it's you who are responsible. From an organizational perspective, it's the head. In the family, if a family is an organization, it starts with the head of the family to walk the talk and talk the talk. In an organization, it starts with the leaders to walk the talk and talk the talk. So that's my view. I don't know what the Harvard view is, but that's my view.
I think that I'll add one, that is a question of your own self-assessing the reality accurately, without biases, without your own biases, without your own even emotional influences on you. It involves a little bit logical thinking, a little bit thinking on problem solving and decision making, no doubt, but actually is a question of walking the talk. It's a question of walking the talk. And it operates that you are talking and talking only, but you are also walking the talk. You realize to the extent that critical behavior of yours, or judgmental behavior of yours, or controlling behavior of yours, or any sort of, trying to reprimand others, how it can affect badly the organization, and how you will be just crushing the eggshell in due course of time.
One of the things that we did discuss during our conversation is that walking on eggshells disintegrates the team. It disintegrates the family. And now, if that be so, how do you do the reverse part and integrate everything together?
I'll just, for the organization, like I said, we have to shift the paradigm of where the money goes. Right? The corporation is a money-making exercise. We all know that. It's a profit, it's not a non-for-profit, it's not a family. So I've never seen, Pavan sir, so far, where in organizations that have a really rich organizational development culture and investment, I've never seen that they have a certified transactional analyst course offered to employees or to leaders. Every leader should be a certified transactional analyst, right? Pause there from the organization perspective. From the family perspective, it's more complex, actually. It's easier in an organization. It's more difficult, to your point, to undo in a family, because that's where what I said earlier comes in. It's an intergenerational transfer of habits, behaviors, and ego states. So we have to start breaking those intergenerational journey of those ego states, because the more as generation A transfers to generation B, transfers to generation C, the social political environment is changing and becoming more complex. Mr. C. Pal Singh didn't have access to social media when he grew up and he developed an ego state that was his natural ego state or his paradigm of ego state. But when a child is growing up today, they are both inheriting the ego states from their parents, grandparents, their families, but they're also impacted by the social political environment, right? Social media, political environment. So it becomes more complex. And if we don't break that with self-awareness, therapy, mental well-being, being okay to go to therapy and seek help, you cannot solve for this. All the help cannot happen in the four walls of the house. You have to, like I said about couples therapy, you have to open up to an objective third party for families to break this cycle where it is causing disintegration or dysfunction, right? Probably the better word in families.
One of the things that Mr. Sipal Singh I wanted to suggest was that as NISSMAT, we should have a organization, or we should have a cell where people can walk in to us with their problems, and our experts can help them solve their problems, maybe at home or at the workplace. And this is something that I wish that we do start on. But the bigger question that I have is, how can you how can you make two life partners who are walking on eggshells amongst themselves into a cordial relationship?
I will keep saying what I say, which is all of what we said applies. But if there is a walking on eggshells, first of all, identify that it's a walking on eggshells situation. The problem in couples and families is we don't talk about this. We bury it under the carpet. We pretend it doesn't exist. So first of all, uncover it with self-awareness and with elders in the family. That's the advantage we have in our structure, in the South Asian structure, in the Western structure. It may not be a family member, but it may be directly going to somebody outside. But I would say we do need to change the culture of not hiding, not pretending to the world that, oh, ours is an ideal family. It's okay to have issues because we are all human beings with cells and atoms, and different people will have issues. So I think we have to change culturally in families, and then you couples should seek help, should open up, should seek help first with themselves, and then with the elders in the family, and then outside the four walls of the family, seek help, because there are people that can do this, right? That neither the three of us are qualified to do in a very professional way and help resolve the issue.
May I have the last word on walking on eggshells, Mr. Sipal Singh, from your side?
No, I only the last you touched about the relationship in the marriage relationship or matrimonial relationship. Actually, I like to tell you that this urban theory, there were classes for 7 days only. And the entire country, most of the people in the world were taken in with this theory. And 7 days they were having these classes, whereby they say they solved most of the matrimonial problem in the 7 days classes with them. And basically was that try to understand the psychological state in which your partner is operating. As simple as that. And don't try to cover your psychological state by something, you cover under this thing. You come openly and then validate each other in that state. When you validate each other individually, then probably a healthy relationship and awareness and understanding arises. So my submission is that people should join some transactional analysis classes. Maybe many people will learn from it because they have just given it up because of subsequent to that, some other theories came up and they said, this is like this, that is like the deep you go into it, a number of psychological things will come up. But basically, this is transactional analysis to understand the ego state of the other person and be even apologetic if required at times, means you are avoiding conflict and disharmony.
So that means before the conflict starts, say sorry. That's what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's not a copy.
I think it's sorry, and also asking open-ended questions, right? Could you tell me why did you feel that way? Right? Why did you feel that way? Why? Like, ask open-ended questions to each other, and we don't do that naturally, right? We generally tend to be in closed-ended community.
It's not easy to ask that question within a family. Let me just tell you that.
Because it's a vulnerable question. Like I said, you'll have to be comfortable bringing your most inner vulnerable self to the table.
Okay, I think, but one of the things, Mr. Sipal Singh, I would be talking about is we should open up our doors in NISSMAT to look at any work stress related issues or family stress related issues, and I'll ask the staff in NISSMAT to take in the queries of people who sort of may have this, and we'll direct them to yourself or Kashiana. If you can sort of spend 5 minutes with them, that will sort of help them along. And I think this wraps up today's episode on relationship walking on eggshells. I hope you found our discussion enlightening and gained valuable tips for fostering more open and honest relationships. Effective communication is the key to breaking the cycle of walking on eggshells. And I thank you all for joining us at NISSMAT today. If you enjoyed this episode, I request you once again, please subscribe and share it with others who might benefit. Until next time, take care, nurture your connections with care and confidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you.